My name is Paul Gray. I'm the head of key accounts for GroupBC, looking after our major clients, and also, by coincidence, specializing in the provision of secure systems, particularly in the government and defense sectors. The representatives from PA Consulting and Secura that will be joining me: Tim Ogle, Cybersecurity Director from PA Consulting, and Anthony Doncaster, Head of Pre-Sales from Secura. The agenda will be a little bit of context setting by myself. Then Tim will be talking about controlling data in a digital world, and Anthony will be concluding the presentations, talking about the role of a critical hosting specialist in making sure that the information is held secure, discussing the technical assistance that you can have in making sure your information is held in a manner that is appropriate to your business and security needs. So just a few minutes introducing GroupBC. We're an industry experienced team. We've been around for about 20 years, and we are the software providers in this environment. The product that we have developed at its core is what used to be known as a document management system. If you follow the BIM standards now, ISO 19650, PAS 1192, we provide common data environments that can be pre-configured to suit the workflows, naming conventions, etc., that you would expect to see. And we capture documentation and spatial information that's important for you to hold for your projects and assets. And we have designed our systems that be used absolutely anywhere. All you need is an internet connection, and the system works equally well on a desktop, laptop, tablet, and smartphones. We've focused very much on this. You don't need to download apps. You don't need to install special software on any of these devices. It is a single interface that works absolutely everywhere. The business sectors that we work in, AEC and infrastructure, is traditionally the area where we have been strongest. And energy and utilities have become more important to us recently. Retail and property is also now much more important to us. And government and defense has become increasingly important over the last couple of years. We offer what's known as a private cloud. We are UK owned, UK operated. All our software development is undertaken in the UK, and the support is provided here as well. And the private cloud instance gives you the options to configure the system to meet your requirements. We have within the software a very highly configurable access control model. The default situation is people only see things that they've been invited to see and to collaborate on. You can change things from as simple as the password settings to make sure they conform to your business standards. And we support single sign-on through both what I would call the traditional Microsoft Active Directory, as well as SAML 2. We can provide single or two-factor authentications. And whilst not trying to take away any of Anthony's materials from later, there's a lot of options that we can work with Secura to make sure that the system is configured to meet the requirements, with options for encryption, intrusion detection, which Anthony is going to talk through in much more detail. And as your service provider, we have made sure that we conform to the best possible standards. We are ISO 27001 certified. We're a current G-Cloud 11 service provider. We also have Cyber Essentials accreditation, and we've been through the JOSCAR accreditation process for people working in the defense sector. Examples of the customers we work with, hopefully you'll recognize there are many names that you will be familiar with. And this is a list of clients that we are extremely proud of. We are involved with Heathrow, HS2, Highways England, as well as all the major contractors that you would expect to see, and many of the utility companies that probably provide your water, your power, and from a retail and property perspective, both finance, companies, traditional retailers such as Sainsbury's, property owners and operators, the University of Birmingham, Land Securities, British Land, a whole wide variety of clients that we work with. With regard to government and defence, these are things that we can't talk about, but we have been involved working with projects, building hangars for aeroplanes, docks for ships, and working on the refurbishment of government buildings. So these are things that would give you the reassurance that our systems have been checked by the relevant authorities and found to conform to the highest standards. With regard to the information that we hold, typically we have historically worked in the left-hand column in the supply chain, working with the people who are providing the resources to complete your projects and delivering assets to you. But over the last few years, we've worked much more frequently with the asset owners, holding both project information in what's known as a PIM and asset information in what's known as an AIM. A typical example of this would be Sainsbury's, where we hold details of their whole estate, as well as the projects and investments that they're making to improve and enhance their portfolio of assets in the field. On the right-hand column, you can see there are a list of applications and systems that has become much more integrated with the CDE. Historically, we worked standalone, but much more now we are working in an integrated environment, exchanging information with these other systems, taking instructions as things happen in an ERP system or a CRM system. Then relevant actions can be taken within your CDE. We control both programs and project information. We can access that information through 3D models. We can locate those models on maps. We can hold information of assets down to the individual attribute level. And what our system does is move you from the unmanaged world with a tangle of information and applications into one trusted source of information that you use to both manage your projects and your assets and provide information to the other core business systems that your business depends upon. The CDE, we like to see, as I'm sure you would expect us to say, sits at the core of everything you do, providing access to documents, property information, handover information, providing workflow capabilities. We have the capability of locating all that information for you on a map, but also now we're working very much with the other systems that you would use for winning work, for managing your contracts. Your GIS systems as well can be a source of data that we publish to make available to people working on your projects. What is the importance of being compliant to the best practice for cybersecurity? A quote from the head of the National Cybersecurity Centre, where basically a major attack on the United Kingdom is a matter of when, not if. And I'm sure you'll have seen in the press recent examples of the impact that cyber attacks on major companies can really have. 75% of companies in the construction, engineering and infrastructure industry have said that they have experienced a cyber incident within the last 12 months. Our monitoring of our systems would say that these things don't happen every day, but certainly we do pick up where people are trying to gain access and take appropriate action when necessary. 72% of large UK businesses have experienced a cybersecurity breach or attack in the last 12 months. Medium businesses, slightly lower figure, 67%. This is basically saying that between 2/3 and 3/4 of most significant companies in the UK will experience an attack this year. Cybercrime, it is estimated, will cost $6 trillion per year on average by 2021. And finally, a statistic that I found truly troubling: nearly 2/3 of a billion records were the subject of attack in December 2019. You've only got to have listened to the reports on the news about the cyber attack in America that they are publicising now to see how many records can be compromised by these types of events. So I would like to hand over now to Tim, and he will take this forward.
So, morning everybody. My name's Tim Ogle. I work for PA Consulting. I currently run PA Consulting's Technical Cybersecurity Services division. What that means in practice is things like pen testing, forensics, incident response, assurance, moving over into strategy and transformation around cybersecurity. The reason we're talking today, and the reason I've been asked by GroupBC to present, is largely because we've been working with GroupBC over the last 12 months. And some of the things we're going to talk about, we've certainly been talking about with GroupBC, and clearly we work with all sorts of clients, and GroupBC are a very interesting company given the sort of stretch and diversity of the sort of clients they work with, which also leads on to the fact that there's some really, really critical data that they manage on behalf of their clients, and why it's so important that cybersecurity is a high profile thing within their business. Anyway, on to today. What I'm going to talk to you about is a bit of an overview of why we should control data in the digital world. What I'm not going to do is bore you to death with cyber geekery. I'm going to try and talk in plain English. I'm going to try and talk in a language that you'll all understand, assuming that not everybody on this call is a cybersecurity expert. But I'm going to take you through sort of four things. I'm going to take you through sort of the context to digital transformation and what we see happening in the market, why we need to take cybersecurity threats really seriously, and why it is often too late when we do look at these things. I'm going to walk you through a really typical breach life cycle, and then we're going to move into a few of the steps that you could take. Like I say, it's quite a broad subject, so I'm going to keep it at a reasonably high level, but try and bring it to life with some stories and some anecdotes that we've picked up along the way. Anyway, before we go any further, I'll give you just 1 minute on quick overview of PA Consulting. We are a reasonably well-kept secret in the market. Lots of people know us, but not everybody knows what we do. So PA Consulting, we've been around since about 1943. You can see the stats and facts of the company on the page. What we are, though, as well as being a management consultancy, we're an innovation and technology consultancy. And the best way I can bring that to life is where I'm currently sat is in our Global Innovation Technology Centre, which is just outside Cambridge. And if I walk around this building here, I'll bump into engineers and scientists and electrical engineers and biologists and chemists. Basically, there's all sorts of people here you would not normally find in a management consultancy. And because of those skills, it means that we can get involved in all sorts of projects. So I've got one page here, which again, I'm not going to bore you to death with every single example on it. I'm going to pull a few out of the sort of things that we do. If you look at the top of the page, Skipping Rocks Lab, we're really motivated by making a difference in the world. So any project that comes along that means that we can help the world become a better place, we are all over it. So an example of that, we're working with Skipping Rocks Lab, where we're helping sort of take plastic out of the marketplace. Over on the top right, we're working with Virgin Hyperloop to help define and understand how we can make that transport potentially work in the future. We are working with, and it's not one on this page, but working with a company called WaterSource, who are an Australian company looking to help fix the sort of shortage of clean water available to the world, both in a profit and non-profit capacity. And we're working with them to take their great innovation and idea that they've got and turn it into something that they can manufacture at scale and then roll out across the world in terms of the marketplaces where they need to take it. And then more on the cybersecurity front, there's an example we've got where we were asked by the UK government to help design a data diode. Now, those of you who've never bought a data diode, first of all, you're probably going, I don't know what it is. A data diode is effectively a very, very secure device that sits in a network and stops traffic leaking between high and low environments. So if you're carrying something really secure in a high environment, you can use data diode to stop it getting back into the low environment in terms of the security levels. So the reason the UK government asked us to help build this data diode, which we call Oak Door, is that it changed the market in terms of the price point at which they go for. Typically, when you go and buy a data diode in the market, they run for about £50,000 to £100,000 a piece. Through our innovation and close working with the UK, we managed to devise a product which we can sell for much, much less than that, which means that we're saving money for the government. They can deploy these things all over the place, and they're also commercially available too. So it kind of gives you a flavour of some of the sort of things that we do get involved in, which is not always immediately obvious when you look at the front door. Okay, so that's enough about PA. I'm now going to walk you into how we see things happening from a digital perspective in the world. And it's a really good starting place when you're talking about cybersecurity. So needless to say, across the market, across the world, everything is becoming more and more digital. This is because we can see huge opportunities in terms of how we can grow, how we can embrace efficiencies. And it's embracing these opportunities that's really important to customers. But what it does mean, though, and one thing that we do see a lot of, is when these technologies are embraced, they're not always often thought through. And often when you come from a cybersecurity perspective, you find that the cybersecurity perspectives of how you embrace technology has been an afterthought. And if you put this into sort of 4 areas, number 1, clearly there's technological advances. We're seeing things like cloud, obviously, which lots and lots of companies are adopting at serious pace now. But when you look at new challenges coming through, we're busy thinking about the ethics and the efficiency and the effectiveness and how to secure things like artificial intelligence and machine learning technology, which is coming through as we speak. It's a very, very fast-moving environment. It's not one that anybody, I think, has got their head around completely yet. But nevertheless, it doesn't mean you should be thinking about it and trying to plan for the future of how you work with that. To compensate with the technological advances, lots of the regulators are coming out with reasons why and frameworks by which you should be complying, depending on the marketplaces you work in. I'm going to come on to that in more detail later, so I won't go cover that here. When you look at partners and competitors, clearly partners are important. You need to probably use partners, and there are very few companies in this world that don't work with partners to advance what they do. But it's equally really important that you understand their security posture and you understand that you're joining up and you aren't creating weaknesses by working together. And then finally, clearly the cyber threats are not going away. We're going to cover a few stories in a minute in terms of the cyber threats we see. I haven't picked the traditional well-known ones, to be fair. I've picked some which bring to life the reasons of why we see breaches happen. And hopefully that'll lead on to some of the things you can start to think about to effectively prevent them. Okay, so controlling the digital world. So cyber transformation is clearly something a lot of companies are thinking about as part of their digital transformation journey. I think the key thing for me here is there's 2 aspects to this. It's really exciting to look at the new sort of shiny technology that's coming down the market and what you can do with it within your companies. But most companies are also not starting from a greenfield site. They're starting from a place where you've got a legacy estate and you've got old systems and old networks that you still need to have and you can't get rid of because you haven't got infinite resource and you haven't got infinite money and you haven't got infinite time. So therefore you need to understand how you can basically build this transformation using the legacy estate that you have, but also embracing future technology. And it's when you join those 2 things together, again, you often find weaknesses because they don't always easily integrate. The way that we look at this, if you think about it from the top right and then the bottom left, at the top right, you've got strategy, transformation, innovation, basically the vision of where you're trying to take the company, what you're trying to do, and what technologies would fall into that, which jumps down to the bottom left, which is where you have the technology and the ingenuity, which become the enablers of how you make the transformation happen. And then all the stuff in the middle is all the stuff that you really need to think about. So from left to right, you've got secure by design. We always say it's much easier to design security into a new system or a new process if you do it right at the start. And that secure by design can be doing things like a really sensible architecture, or it can be using secure code techniques if you're developing a new application or new code. Because if you do that right at the start, it means that when you actually go to implement the thing, you're going to find fewer problems. If you do all those things up front and you realize that you have design security in, when you come to the activities such as penetration testing, it often means that when you do those activities, you'll find there are fewer problems to fix, which is great. We often get frustrated with situations where clients have obviously left security right to the last minute, where the last thing that they think about and then we're seen as the bad guys because we're basically stopping a project go live. It's not the intention, it's just that it's not secure. If you think about those things right at the start of a project, it makes the implementation of the project much easier to do. So step 1, secure by design. Step 2 is be ingenious how you design your processes and your governance and control around the business, so that it encourages compliance and it doesn't become an inhibitor to the business. If you design these processes well, how you can manage the risks and the process and the flow of data across your business, it means that it will flow better and be less clunky and easier to work with, which moves on to the right-hand side, which is where we suggest strongly that people should have a cyber savvy mindset. And this manifests in all sorts of places. So I'm sure everybody on this call has sat through their annual compliance training, which basically says you won't do any money laundering. You'll tick these boxes on how you secure data across your business. And I suspect when you've gone through those training activities, probably not much of it is stuck. It probably becomes a bit normal and therefore doesn't have much impact anymore. So therefore, as people across the business, we need to do 2 things. We need to make that awareness and education and insight, we need to make it more impactful, but not more impactful in terms of scaring the life out of everybody, because that doesn't work, we don't believe. It's more impactful in terms of making it normal and making it commonplace and making it part of how we see the business operating. And a little example of what we've started promoting strongly with a lot of the clients we work with is something called cyber nudges. So these are like really small things that you do in a business that just nudge people towards thinking about securing data and making sure they're making the right choices. Now, it could be as simple as if you've got an email that's coming from an external source, make sure the banner on that email is bright red or a different color, which makes it obvious that you need to just pay a little more attention to it. So if there is a link on that email, you don't immediately click it. You immediately ask yourself, okay, so where's this email come from? Why have I been sent it? What's this link for? And just check the obvious things before you click on it. Clearly, there's technology things you can put behind that. So if you do click the link, there's some systems behind the scenes which might filter and say, we're not opening this because it's not safe. But if you can get the human to think about that before we get to that technology kicking in, you've saved yourself a whole load of problems. So that's kind of how we look at controlling the digital world across those 3 aspects. So step 1, secure by design. Number 2, ingenious processes and compliance and governance. And step 3 is making sure that people understand what's expected and make it easy for them to do their jobs and be secure in how they work. Okay, so to bring this to life a bit, we've picked out 4 examples of recent breaches. So to bring to life why we should protect our asset data and why we should protect our project data that we have. And clearly, when you're looking at things GroupBC do, they'll be sat with an awful lot of projects and asset data from potentially some of you as clients or future clients. And now these 4 examples, they're not the most well-known examples. Obviously, I'll admit the TravelX one was quite well-known, given that happened over Christmas. But the reason I left it in as an example is because this was massively high impact. And this news story I pulled yesterday. So there's still services that are offline a month after just over a month when the incidents happened. And everybody's going to say, well, this was an encryption ransomware attack. And by ransomware, I basically mean somebody hacks into their networks. They will encrypt everything in the business, and they won't release that data until you paid a huge extortionate amount of money. That isn't totally what happened here. Yes, somebody did hack into TravelX's systems, and they did steal a load of data, but they didn't encrypt anything. But they did hold TravelX to ransom. But that was the threat that will release all the data in the market if you don't pay us a load of money. So it was a ransom, but it wasn't ransomware in the true encryption sense. It was ransomware in the sense that they stole a load of data and then held on it and said, we'll release it to the market unless you pay us. I don't know what the outcome is, because clearly we're not close to the investigation of that breach, and if we were, I wouldn't be talking about it. That's the irony of working in incident response. You can't actually talk about any of the clients we work with, because that's part of the service we provide. So if I am talking about any of these, it's because we're not working on any of these particular ones. But yeah, interesting in that this was an example of TravelX were breached months and months before it was spotted. And the attackers stayed quiet. They sat there gathering intelligence, gathering information, and then used it to their means when the time was right. Top right, I've pulled out this one. I thought it was a really sort of interesting one. Not everybody's going to know what TikTok is. To be fair, I've only learned in the last month or two when my kids started showing me what it is. But it's a small app that sits within your mobile phone devices, and you can make funky little movies that repeat and replay, and you'll see them on things like Instagram and Facebook and where else. But the interesting little story in that the US Navy's banned TikTok from mobile devices, and largely because they've found a flaw in the back. There's a backdoor in the application, which means you could potentially access sort of wider data through that phone and then in the network. And I'm not saying you'll run away and stop TikTok on your accounts across your entire businesses. You might want to, I don't know. That's not my point. But the point is, you've got to be really mindful of the third parties and the suppliers that you're working with. And it becomes even more commonplace when things like TikTok or WhatsApp or things that become more business normal in terms of what we use. So LinkedIn is a really common example of that. I'm not suggesting any of these are not secure platforms. I'm simply suggesting we need to have our eyes and minds switched on when we're assessing the applicability of these applications in the business. And it's not just about the stuff we build, it's the stuff that other people build that we might just adopt. The bottom right one, Aussie Bank say server upgrade led to data breach. This is really a story about, it's not just your own business, it's your supply chain, it's your third parties, it's the service providers you need to work with. And you need to make sure that they're secure and need to make sure that they're up to speed in terms of their requirements and what they need to do. Because if they get breached, you get breached. And then bottom right is a really clear example of some statistics that came out a week or so ago, basically saying that human error is the problem with cybersecurity. It's not always data breaches in terms of people hacking it. A huge amount of breaches that we get involved with personally, it's usually because somebody's being socially engineered and they've clicked on something they shouldn't, and they've given away some data they shouldn't have done. So, not saying it's always the technology, it's often the people that have caused the problem to start with. Okay, moving on a little bit. Another thing that we like to sort of, because we like companies to understand when we're working with them, is that cybersecurity is very much a team game. And cybersecurity is about building and maintaining trust across the business. And this diagram hopefully illustrates how this comes across in the various aspects of the business. Clearly, the person who, or the people that immediately get tagged with being in charge of cybersecurity are usually the CISO, Chief Information Security Officer, or if the company's in a smaller capacity, you don't often have a CISO, you might have an IT lead or an IT manager who's suddenly adopted the role of IT security as well. They will often be working for the CIO. The CIO is only one part of it, because equally they will jump across into the finance functions, the operations, the group legal, the HR. Every division of the company needs to be aligned in how you think about these things, which is why we say strongly it's a team game. And this isn't just all about the IT manager or the IT security people running this. This is about the whole company coming together. And then as you go around the cycle, you're clearly thinking about the suppliers that you work with and how they manage your data and what they do. And obviously there's been some very well-known example breaches of, so for example, was it Target? Target, I think, got breached via their air conditioning supplier. Not the first immediate point you'd think of getting in, but it's nevertheless a way in. And an example we saw was in a financial institution. We managed to find, and it was through an exercise we were doing, we managed to find a way in via a fridge in the kitchen, which was on site in the particular financial institution. Now, the fridge is not the immediate place you'd think of getting in through a network, but it was a network fridge. It was an IoT device. We managed to find a way in because the passwords hadn't been changed on the fridge, and it hooked us straight into the networks of that particular institution. So yeah, really need to understand who your suppliers are. You need to understand what your security and how that works across your business. You need to make sure that you've got really, really strong architecture. So if people do get in, they can't run wild across your entire business in one fell swoop. That links into your infrastructure, whether that be sort of electrical or physical. Both come into play. Then you need to think about the applications that you're using with across the business, and then it's a virtuous circle. So as you keep thinking about all those things, then you'll become more resilient in time. And clearly, at the top of the shop there, you've got the business strategy. The reason we're all in business is obviously to grow and make our businesses stronger and bigger. Cybersecurity is simply an enabler to that. Is not the reason to be. But if we're not secure, then clearly that puts everything we do at risk, because if we can't be trusted with our data, then our clients won't trust us. Okay, so I've put together a small story of the life cycle of a typical breach. And this isn't based on any one single incident we've seen. This is based on many incidents we've gone out to. And I use the word typical inverted commas because there isn't a plain example as to why this happens. There's all sorts of flavors and techniques, but if I sort of broke this down, this is typically what we see. There's 3 stages to every attack that we see. There's usually a period of reconnaissance. There's then the attack, and then there's the maintain presence or run, and I'll explain what all of those are next. So first stage is usually reconnaissance. The duration of this, I've put 3 to 9 months. It can be as short as days, but it can be a year. And the reason this is a really long time is because the people who are trying to attack us and trying to get in our company, first of all, they've got more time than we've got, because their only job is to hack into companies and organizations and steal data. And the reason they're trying to do that is either because they want to steal intellectual property, or they want to do bad stuff with that information that you've got. And that bad stuff might be, if it's critical national infrastructure, it might show weaknesses in how you could attack a particular site or plant, or it could be personal data they want to leak, or it could be personal data they want to exploit. But there's all sorts of reasons why, but it's usually because they want to steal something or they want to make money from it. That reconnaissance stage usually goes on for ages. The typical activity they'll do before they start this, they'll start targeting your company. They'll gather things like open source intelligence, or OSINT as we call it, which is scouring social networks, business networks, looking at trade press journals, understanding who's in the company, where you operate, where you go, what you do, how you work, where you go for dinner after work, if you share that sort of stuff on Facebook or other social media outlets. They might even, if you're a particularly interesting character in a company, they might even track into your family and see if there's weaknesses through there. But effectively a long period of just gathering intelligence so that we can start to understand how to attack you and what might make you susceptible. We'll then do some dark web trawling. Typically on the dark web, there's all sorts of past breach data. And if you go searching for stuff, you can see if any old passwords are on there or things that might just make the job easy, because that data is already out there. So that's where typically they would go looking. They will then plan hard, plan seriously. They're good at this. They do it every day for a job. These aren't usually people who just accidentally get into hacking. They've been doing this for years. And if they're coming from a nation state, they're often, or an organized crime unit, they're often very well funded and very well skilled. So there'll be a good degree of planning and using techniques and ideas that have come from all sorts of other exercises that are done in the past. But the bit that all of this normally happens before you see anything. So this will all be happening around you. You won't know it's happening. You won't have any signals of it happening. The first bit that usually has any sort of impact on a company is when they start to social engineer you. And that's when they'll be sending either really convincing emails to you to get you to click on things, or they'll be trying to get you to open up apps, which you won't necessarily do with a new add-on. We've seen new apps that have gone past, or app updates which have got various spurious codes written in them that don't necessarily pass all the certification that go through Microsoft and other people. But either way, they're trying to get in, they're trying to find a way to get to you, and they can be very convincing. Once they've managed to get that social engineering to work, they'll then use the passwords or credentials or whatever the route is they've managed to get to gain entry to the network. And once they've gained entry to the network, their job then will be to observe and explore, to gather and collect. But bottom line is they just stay quiet. They don't want to be spotted. They don't want to be seen. They want to be really quiet and creep around your network and figure out what's in there, what's interesting, what's going to be of use to them if they really want to exploit you. And that's why this period can take 3 to 9 months, because often once they've got in, they'll sit there for months just gathering and just understanding who you are, what you do, where the good stuff is, so that when the time right, they can then exploit it. And that's why step 2 on this, the overt attack, lasts hours, days, and that's typically when all the noise happens. It's either you've spotted them because your security operations center said something strange going on here, it doesn't look right, and you've spotted it, or they'll come at you and say, we'd like £1 million, otherwise we're going to release all this data to the market. Again, depends on the motivation of what they're trying to do, but that period of time, that overt attack, number one, it's probably a surprise to you as a company. It usually is, but it wasn't a surprise to the attackers because they've been in there for months. Number two, it's always really stressful. It's never a nice situation to be in. And then the third step of this, which is the, if you're the attacker, depends on what your motivation is. Sometimes when they get spotted, their objective will then be, okay, so they're going to shut down that way we got in the first time. But whilst we've been in there for the previous 5 months, we've managed to plant another 2 ways to get in. So you'll shut down the first way, but then there'll be 2 more that they'll keep quiet. So they'll either maintain a presence which you don't know about, which is why it's really important to then do cleanup activities like threat hunting, or they'll run and just scarper because they've been found, they got what they wanted, they then maybe disappear with the data they've got, or they'll negotiate with you. Either way, that's typically what happens. So the next slide, I'm not going to go through every single point in it, but it's mainly to sort of bring out the picture of where we think you should apply the effort to this. And then again, against the 3 elements of where we see the attack, we see the biggest chunk of time should be spent on preparation. And our view here is, if you make your business match fit, it will make you more resilient in the long run. And it'll mean that when you get to that attack, that cyber incident, it becomes a lot less stressful because you actually know what you're doing. And the other thing is, it makes you a lot less likely that you're going to get breached, because you'll have gone through your business continuity management planning, you'll have done IR planning, you'll have done threat intelligence, you'll have done pen testing, you'll have done social engineering exercises across your company, you'll understand how your staff are performing against stuff like this. One thing that we see a lot of, and we think is really good, is once you've planned out your business responses and you understand how this is going to work, you'll then go through things like wargaming. Wargaming is really good because it stress tests all the different functions of your business, brings them together in an afternoon or a day, and you can sort of literally simulate, this is what an attack would look and feel like. And you can start to see how the different functions of your business would operate against each other or in support of each other. But it's not until you get that stress situation that you start to see the gaps. So it does 2 things. One, it tells you where the gaps are. And number 2, it's a hugely great educational exercise, because everybody goes through those exercises, they usually walk out going, I learned a lot today. And therefore it sticks in your mind. And it's that, how do you train people to be really cyber savvy? That's a great way of doing it. So we advocate spending a lot of time in preparation and a lot of energy in preparation, because it means 2 things. The actual overt attack is less likely to happen because you're going to be a tougher, more resilient business. But when it does, it's going to be a lot less stressful because you'll know what you're going to do. You'll have your playbooks and run books already laying down. You'll know what you're going to do step by step. And strangely, that sort of immediate attack lasts for a day or so, maybe less, because you're then very quickly into the manage and recover, which is when you're going into communication planning, analysis and limitation of what's happened. You're into recovery, you're into digital forensics, threat hunting, and basically cleaning up the mess that's happened. But the key bit from all of it, make sure you capture the lessons learned so that you can feed them back into your future preparation. So I hope that was useful in terms of bringing to life a little bit of how we see these sort of things coming together. One of the things that GroupBC asked me to talk about was, and it's because one of the things we've talked about as we've been working together, is what accreditations, governance and compliance should you target? And I haven't put down every single accreditation or every single assessment in the world, because there are literally dozens and dozens of them, but I've put down a few of the more popular ones that we spot. And it falls into 3 categories. Number 1, there's quite a few ways of running a maturity assessment. And in effect, a maturity assessment from a cybersecurity perspective will help you understand where you are. So it'll help you understand how strong or tough you are. And the typical ones we use and see are NIST, CIS critical security controls. OWASP top 10 very much looks at coding and secure coding. So if you are in a business which has development, that could be a way of looking at it. Number 2, you've got public facing standards that would provide wider assurance to your customers and suppliers and partners. And that's through accreditations such as Cyber Essentials, which is in the UK, Cyber Essentials Plus, obviously ISO 27001 I suspect lots of you have heard about, and many of you will have. And if you enter the payments world, PCI payment card industry security standards is clearly a standard that you have to hit, because your acquiring banks will insist that you have to. And then the third category is around regulations, which are usually government or regulatory enforced standards. I'm sure everybody on this call knows what GDPR is, and I'm sure you've all been thinking about it, if not done things to fix that. Also, about the same time as GDPR came in, the NIS directive, which is very much focused on the critical national infrastructure, but it's looking very much at the security of network and information systems, but with a focus on critical national infrastructure. So that's equally got as tougher teeth potentially as GDPR has, but it's less well known because it affects less public directly, but nevertheless really, really important standard and regulation that you have to hit. There's a number of sector-specific regulations that we see coming in. A number I pulled out there. CBEST is effectively something called red teaming for the financial services tier 1 banks. And a red team, in plain language, is basically it's a way of hacking into a company using typical attack approaches. So we would call it threat intelligence-led pen testing, but that's effectively what CBEST is. And then I've seen TBEST, which is telco version of it, MBEST, which is a mobile version of it. Assure is aerospace aviation focused version of it. So there's a number of sector specific standards that have come through. And then the last one on there I put on because it's quite important if anybody's working into the sort of government environments. So lots of key critical government data networks have to go through what's called a IT health check, which is a certain standard of penetration testing, which can only be done via accredited companies that have been accredited by the National Cybersecurity Centre. It doesn't just impact public sector bodies, though. If you're an organisation that's supplying into some of these networks, then you equally probably need to go through a IT health check type standard penetration testing. Okay, and then finally, I'll wrap up. Quick flavour of what our cybersecurity services are. Clearly, PA Consulting, we do all sorts of things. But if you think about it, it drops into sort of 5 main areas where we tend to find our clients need help. So number 1 is maturity assessments, just helping clients understand where they are, and what they need to do, and how to prioritize, and sort of, because if you pick off cybersecurity as a whole subject, it can be overwhelming, it can be very expensive. There's often a lot of things that you can do which don't cost a lot but can have a very big impact in your business. It could be change to practice, change to policy, it can be a change of working methods. It's complemented by technology, but it can have a huge impact. There's a number of things we can do to provide assurance, whether that be things like penetration testing, red team, social engineering, and so on. We're seeing more and more companies look at this whole subject holistically from a cybersecurity transformation perspective, because they realize it's not just a technology problem, it's about changing how you work, the culture of the business, how you have the right skills and people in the business. Incident response is something we still get involved with. More and more we're getting involved with the planning and preparation for incidents, so companies are more ready when the worst day happens. But nevertheless, we do get calls. In fact, we got 2 yesterday. So strangely, we've seen a rise in incidents since Christmas. Don't know why, but we're seeing a rise. And the last point on here is it's part of the transformation, but it's security by design. Make sure you don't leave security as an afterthought. Make sure it's built right up front to planning when you're thinking through new projects. Anyway, I'm going to conclude there and pass over to Anthony.
Thank you very much, Tim. Appreciate very much what you've presented there. I'd like now to introduce Anthony to the audience. Anthony is from Secura and head of pre-sales. Anthony, over to you.
Great, thanks, Paul, and thanks, Tim, for that. Good morning, everyone. Just a brief introduction. So my name is Anthony Doncaster. I'm the head of pre-sales here at Secura. So I manage the technical side of the commercial team, which includes solutions architecture, our product management, and also that includes our portfolio of security services as well. So what I'm going to go over today, I'm just going to go over a bit about what we do, followed by a bit more context about specifically how we work with GroupBC, and then move on to some of the security products that we implement as an add-on service to cover some of the threats that Tim presented in his part of the webinar. So what does Secura do? Basically, we're critical hosting specialists. So we specialize in providing hosting for critical applications. So these are applications that demand high availability. They're mainly revenue generating. So most of our customers are either software developers or ISVs, but we also do quite a lot for e-commerce clients as well. And digital agencies where the sort of high availability, maybe not so much revenue generating, but in terms of kind of brand impact for not being available online for sort of household name websites is still very important. And also applications that need to ensure data security and integrity to mitigate some of the threats that Tim mentioned, as well as others that are out there. So we provide our cloud services from a range of platforms. We manage and run our own infrastructure, our virtual private cloud. So this is a highly available by design. It's a VMware-based multi-tenant platform that we run out of a number of data centers in the UK. But we also leverage Microsoft's Azure platform as well. We have a lot of clients who are on their digital transformation journey. So this might be refactoring their applications from a sort of standard virtual machine-based infrastructure to more of a services-based infrastructure. So we do a number of different public cloud management services. So we run the platforms, but we also manage the platforms as well. And we offer add-on services in terms of security management, database management, and also patching, monitoring, and things like that on top of just providing the infrastructure and hardware. We're fully accredited, so we have our ISO 27001, 2717, 9001, and 20000, which is our service desk. So we operate a manned service desk 24/7/365, and the 20,000 certification is in line with the ITIL standards of service desk management. We're also a member of the G-Cloud framework, so we can bid for work on government-based contracts as well, government hosting. So in the context of what we do for GroupBC, so we've supported GroupBC on our platform since 2016. It's a secure by design cloud architecture, so most of GroupBC's assets are held on our virtual private cloud. They also have some storage systems providing NFS storage that are provided at the hardware level. The whole solution is split across data centers. It's highly available as standard. There's no single points of failure within the infrastructure itself, be that storage, network, internet transit, the compute layer, the hypervisors running the virtual machines. Basically, it's designed to recover from any particular hardware fault or transient network fault in the system. And there's a lot of self-recovery and self-healing that is enabled in the platform itself. As I mentioned, we have a manned service desk that operates 24/7. So if there's any issues with the platform itself, or if there's any issues in the managed systems that we're looking after, our support guys are on hand 24/7 to look at any issues that arise and sort those out. We have very strict SLAs around our support service. So in terms of response times and target fix times, we run a priority system so that we can make sure that the more critical problems are dealt with as a priority. And we also give GroupBC access to advanced security solutions. So on top of the inherent security that we build into the platform, things such as isolating customers' resources, networks, dedicated virtual firewalls, and things like that. We also have a number of additional solutions as well on top of that, some of which we manage for GroupBC. So the VPC is delivered from several secure T3+ data centers. They're all UK-based facilities. So all the data held on the VPC is resident in the UK. In terms of the facilities themselves, being Tier 3, they're some of the best data center facilities in the country, physical security, includes perimeter fences, CCTV, 24/7 security guards, and then in terms of having access to our assets within the data center, we have basically named access lists of operatives who are allowed to go in and work on the hardware and infrastructure itself, and the kind of things that they may encounter when they go to the data center. They'll have to go through the fingerprint scanner, so biometric scanners. There's man traps to make sure that you can't tailgate into the data halls, and also they have card access as well, so very, very secure facilities. In terms of how we connect the facilities, we actually run our own dedicated diverse 10 gigabit network between the data centers, which means that if there are transit issues or transient routing issues in any one location, the traffic can reroute via one of the other data centers. So it's a kind of self-healing network that we have set up between the data centers there. So in terms of some of the security products that we offer, and that in particular we manage for GroupBC, there's a number of products that address a few of the things that Tim has mentioned in his part of the webinar. So the first thing is intrusion detection. So basically this is looking at the network traffic coming into the platform and making sure there isn't anything malicious going on at the network level. And we use a product called Alert Logic for that. So I'll cover these in a bit more detail going on. So I'll just kind of skim over these for the minute and then give a bit more, flesh it out a bit in the next few slides. We also offer DDoS protection. So DDoS is sort of an external network threat where basically the network links are flooded with traffic, and basically the volume of the traffic can bring the servers or the network services down and make applications inaccessible. We use a product called CloudFlare to offer that. And then in terms of data security, we offer a couple of levels of encryption at rest. So this is basically encryption when the data is not in transit, just stored on the virtual machines or on the storage platform, to make sure that if for whatever reason that data was removed from the data center, or the virtual machine was imaged remotely, insofar as that might be possible, basically that data would be inaccessible after copying. So we've got a couple of products that we use for that. So we use a product called HighTrust, which basically is a volume encryption at the virtual machine level. So this is encrypting data on the disk drives in the virtual machine. And then NFS encrypted storage, so the large storage areas on the storage hardware, basically that is encrypted at the disk level. And then also in terms of disaster recovery, basically we have a multi-site setup with GroupBC. So they have their assets in a primary data center. Those are replicated to a secondary data center. In the event of any service affecting incident at the primary data center, we can bring up those services in the secondary data center within 24 hours. So going into a bit more detail about some of these products that we use, I'll start off with Alert Logic. So Alert Logic is it's an IDS solution, but it does a few bits more than just intrusion detection. So while it does look at the network traffic and it's looking for malicious network attacks, there's also a few other things it does as well. So there are two parts of it, two main parts. There's the Threat Manager, which covers the IDS, but it also covers vulnerability scanning as well. So while it's looking at the network traffic in a real-time sense, it also, on a schedule, basically scans the servers that it's installed on and does a vulnerability check to see if there's any code exploits that are vulnerable and may need patching. Then you've got the Log Manager. Basically, this is secure offsite log shipping and analysis. So while the Threat Manager is looking in real time at what's happening on the network, the Log Manager is looking at the events that are happening on the servers themselves. And Alert Logic, one of the reasons why we actually chose to partner with Alert Logic is they run their own security operations center. So it's another 24/7 by 365 manned security operations center. So basically their operatives, their security personnel basically are monitoring the data that's coming out of the threat manager and the log manager in real time as well. And the kind of things it's looking for maybe code exploits, it might be brute force attacks, so people trying to repeatedly get into a system with trying to use different passwords, but also things like privilege escalation. So if a user account gets elevated to an administrator, we'll get a notification about that, and so it covers a multitude of threats at the network level, but also has that log element as well. And in terms of if there is an incident, the kind of forensic stage afterwards, where you're looking through the logs to see what happened during the incident, basically they can perform a root cause analysis on those logs as well. In terms of kind of compliance, it ticks a number of boxes. So if you're looking at PCI compliance, these are the kind of solutions that you need to have in place for certain elements of that. And in terms of GDPR as well, it's very useful to have an IDS and a log management solution in case you suffer a data breach. So in terms of how we actually manage this for GroupBC, so as I say, Alert Logic is acting in real time. It's looking at all the data, and then we will get an incident raised from Alert Logic. We will assess the incident and prioritize it. If it's service affecting, it'll be a P1, so it'll be our strictest SLAs around response and fix. And then basically we will liaise with GroupBC to remediate and fix any issues that arise. I'm just aware of the time here, so I'm going to skim across these a little bit now. So CloudFlare, so basically CloudFlare is a global provider of DDoS mitigation. It sits outside our network. It's a cloud-based solution. Basically all the traffic coming into the network goes via CloudFlare, and it's got what's called inline DDoS mitigation. So basically it absorbs any large volumetric DDoS attacks. There's no sort of extra monitoring or configuration. They basically just channel the good traffic to the servers, and then all the malicious traffic is basically absorbed and dropped in their 190 data centers. And then HighTrust, so HighTrust is full VM data encryption. We run secure key servers that hold the encryption keys. These are clustered across data centers. It has a very strong encryption level, AES512, and is compliant to FIPS 142 level 1, which is an American standard, but it's quite a de facto standard in terms of encryption in the IT world. And then we also offer NFS encryption, which is hardware based on the actual storage units themselves. So basically how we manage this, we can encrypt the virtual machines when they're created, or we can actually retrospectively encrypt a virtual machine while it's running afterwards. And the NFS encryption is managed at the infrastructure layer, but that is basically activated by default. And then lastly, the disaster recovery. So basically we use a storage-based replication solution. So all of GroupBC's virtual machines are replicated at the disk level to another data center. And then basically in the event of a site-affecting incident at the primary data center, we bring those services back up in the secondary data center. This is a fully managed process. So basically we handle the whole failover of all the virtual machines and the networks for GroupBC. This is tested annually. So we actually run the tests, make sure everything comes up properly, make sure all the services are available. So last successful test, August 2019. So in terms of how we actually manage that, as well as actually providing the solution, we actually manage the whole end-to-end failover piece as well. And then lastly, just a note on updates and patching. So basically we maintain the infrastructure. So all of that is patched and managed by us as standard. GroupBC manage the updates at the server level, but we also do schedule scanning using Alert Logic to inform them when patches may be required for particular vulnerabilities. So that can be done on a schedule or ad hoc as necessary. So I hope that's given you a kind of brief overview of kind of some of the services that we can offer, and a bit of the context around how we work with GroupBC to offer them. And with that, I'll hand over back to Paul.
Thank you very much for staying with us. If any questions that we have had in, we will respond directly. In conclusion, I'd simply like to say that I hope we've set you thinking. If nothing else, you need to be aware of the fridges in your kitchen, but the importance of planning as well, but also the options that are available from a technological perspective to support your the cybersecurity planning that you put into place, making sure that your whole company is working together as a team to protect yourself from the various threats. Certainly, it's set me thinking about things. I hope it has done for you. So once again, thanks to Tim and Anthony for your contributions this morning. Really appreciate that very much.